Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the video. As you can tell from the title, today we are doing AFC predictions in the NFL. Now, the way that I'm going to structure this video is I'm going to go division by division from the bottom all the way to the top and give you every single division winner. And at the end, after I'm done with all four divisions in the AFC, I'm going to give you the playoff seedings in the AFC. Now, the way that I'm going to back up my standings and the records and all of that is by just giving you a little bit of insight on how the team performed last year and why I think they're either going to improve or get worse based on additions the team had, such as like new players, new coaching staff, or just overall improvement of players that were, like rookies that were that are gaining experience and get that extra bit of time to prepare for the season. You know what I mean? Just that growth that happens behind the scenes. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into the video, starting with the AFC North. Now, the AFC North coming in last place is none other than the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the Bengals are a weird team because, they had the first overall pick last year and they picked Joe Burrow, which honestly was the best pick they probably could have done. Joe Burrow is an extremely talented quarterback. Now, I wasn't particularly high on Joe Burrow when he came out for the draft. Obviously, he put up one of the best statistical seasons any quarterback has ever had in the history of college football. Very impressive numbers at LSU and led them to a national championship. But I still had these doubts about Joe Burrow and whether or not he could truly become that guy in the NFL and live up to the hype. I always kind of saw him as an above average quarterback. I thought at the time that's what I thought he would be. But looking more into his previous playing career, besides that season at LSU, the dude is a winner. He's a winner. Unfortunately, that's something that's not going to happen in Cincinnati because you could have Patrick Mahomes on that team and they probably won't get any more than 5 or 6 wins at tops. So Joe Burrow is going to rack up a grand total, ladies and gentlemen, of 2 wins in Cincinnati. Now, as a Bengals fan, don't be discouraged by this because you guys are obviously building for the future. You guys are not looking to contend right now. You guys are just looking to see positive growth from Joe Burrow and that team. You guys have a lot to look forward to this season. You have Joe Mixon, who is an extremely talented back, and I think is extremely underrated. And Joe Burrow, you just want to, sure, he's not going to put up the wins, but you just want to see that leadership and that talent just flash at times. And with that, as a Bengals fan, you should be pretty happy about. Now, I give you guys the 2 wins against like 2 teams that I think are similarly skilled. Actually, just one team that's similarly skilled because the Jags the Jags are just the Jags. Anyways, I think Washington is another team that is kind of similar to the Bengals. I'll get into them when I do the NFC, but I give you guys a win at home against Jacksonville and a win away on the road at Washington. Now, coming in third place in the AFC North is the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Browns are another very weird team because they have a tremendous amount of talent on both sides of the ball, both on offense and on defense. But here's the thing. I do not trust the coach. I do not trust Kevin Stefanski. It's his first-year head coach here at Cleveland. They fired Freddie Kitchens, who I thought was a horrible hire when that happened, and was just rushed. Like, I don't know why they would hire him. He had never been a head coach anywhere, like literally anywhere, and you just hire him to coach a young Baker Mayfield. And in his second season, Baker did not look good at all. Now, I'm not blaming that completely on Freddie Kitchens. Some of it, I think, was Baker not being completely focused on football. Now, Baker is a talented quarterback. I don't think his potential exceeds being, a top 12 quarterback in the NFL, but he's still good enough to take a team to the playoffs if he is at his, full max, as good as he can be. I think he is a quarterback that can lead a team to the playoffs. Now, my 3 main issues, like I stated, are Kevin Stefanski, first-year head coach. I'm not particularly, I guess you could say, sold on him as a head coach. I think there were plenty of other good coaches out there. But it wasn't a terrible hire. I just don't know how it's going to work out, because what you need for Cleveland as a head coach is somebody who's going to be able to bring all these different personalities together and just have them as a team just play hard and just give it maximum effort. Because as you know, you got OBJ on there, who I think is an extremely talented receiver, and Jarvis Landry, who's also an extremely talented receiver, but at times they just seem unfocused. Jarvis Landry is probably the most focused guy on offense, but Baker, Odell, you got Kareem Hunt, who's also had some issues in the past with off the field stuff. You just need somebody who's going to be able to lead these guys to a win. I think that Kevin Stefanski is a pretty good X and O's coach, but can he really just bring all these personalities together and get some wins? Baker is my number 2 issue on this team. I think that he just needs to focus on football and just try not to do too much, because if you look at the tape, Baker often just tries to do way too much. He tries to pull off a Russell Wilson type play, scrambling out, throwing it into double coverage, interception, and then just kills the drive and kills his momentum, because he could be going on a streak and just throws a pick and just can't recover from it. He's just one of those quarterbacks. Now, my third issue is this is the offensive line. Although it's improved, last year it was a bottom of the league offensive line. It was 23rd, and this year PFF has them maybe even being a top 10 offensive line. And if this O-line can keep it together, I think that this team will actually get some wins, unlike last season where they just had a problem at left tackle and just a patchwork on the offensive line. If this team offensive line can protect Baker and help in the run game, they're going to have a good season. Now, I do have them at 9-7. You'll find out whether or not they make the playoffs at the end. But there's a few important games that I have them winning. And if they lose those games, I don't think they're a playoff team, although I do have them winning in those games. The first game, in my opinion, the most important first game is against Baltimore. Now, I have this one as a loss just because I think it's very important for them to test how good they are against a top 5 team in the NFL. You know what? The best team in the NFL, in my opinion. And I don't think they're going to win the game, but if they're able to keep it close, competitive, and just hold down the Ravens, then I think that will give them a lot of momentum going forward into the season and get some of those early wins. And then the second game that I have them beating the Colts. Now, the Colts are a team that you're going to see I'm really high on. And I think that if they're able to keep this game within reach and just get pressure on that really, really, really good Colts offensive line, I mean, the best O-line in football, if the Browns D-line can just get to Phillip Rivers at a constant rate and create some pressure, then that shows me that they really do have the D-line talent. Because to be honest with you, outside of Myles Garrett, I don't see much else on the defensive line. And the third game that I think is going to be extremely important for them is in Week 10 against the Houston Texans. Now, the Texans are a high offensive power team who don't have a great O-line and don't have a very good linebacker core or secondary outside of Justin Reed at safety. And the reason I have this as an important game is because this is a must-win game. This is a team that is good, but should not be able to beat the Browns if the Browns are playing at the level that I think they should be playing at. So this is a must-win game for the Browns. And if they don't win this game, I honestly lose all trust, and I don't think they make the playoffs. Now, coming in at number 2 in the division, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Steelers, in my opinion, are the sleeper team in the AFC. Outside of another team that I have, it's one of the 2 sleeper teams I have. The Steelers last year won 8 games, okay? Think about that for a second. No Big Ben, 8 games. They had Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph at quarterback. Like, let's be honest, those guys aren't starters anywhere. Mike Tomlin is such a great coach. I mean, this guy's going to be a Hall of Famer for sure. And what he was able to do last year with a bunch of literally nobodies at the quarterback position was incredible to me. Like honestly incredible. The defense was so good and so underrated. Honestly, wasn't talked about enough in my opinion. That Minkah Fitzpatrick trade did wonders for that defense. And I have them going 12-4. Honestly, this team is very, very good. And at a 12-4 record, not winning the division just shows you how highly I think of the next team coming up. And I have 2 very important games for the Steelers. The first one is against an NFC team in the Eagles, week 5. Now, the Eagles are a very talented team. They got a really good quarterback, and they have a really good offensive line. And I think this is going to be a test mainly for their defense. Can their defense create enough stops for their offense to put up points against a mediocre Eagles defense? So I have them winning this game because I think it's a good matchup for them. But if they're not able to clutch up this win, then that makes me just not super sure about the Steelers. So this is a must-win game for them. Now, the other important game I have is in week 12 against the Ravens. Now, when it comes to the Ravens are probably, you already know by now, they're the number 1 seed. The number 1 in the AFC North for me. But this is a must-win game for the Steelers. This is at home. And this game, I chose specifically to see how well their offense can play. Like, what is their true potential? After taking a week 7 loss to the Ravens, can they bounce back, look at the film, and see what they did wrong on offense to try to put up some points? Because their defense will slow down the Ravens, but if they're going to win this game, their offense has to be able to create a spark, and get Big Ben looking like Big Ben from 2017, 2016. And just this offense is going to have to show that it can put up points against a good defense, and show that it's just not a defensive team that they have, but a complete team that can play both good offense and good defense. So I have them winning this game at home. And I think like I said already, it's a very important game for them to win, because that will show me that they're not just a playoff team, but actual contenders in the AFC. Now, coming in at number 1, to absolutely nobody's surprise, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens, honestly, guys, if you don't have them number 1, I don't know what you're doing. They are an extremely talented team, but you're going to say, oh, Earl Thomas, Earl Thomas was released. They released Earl Thomas. Okay, Earl Thomas, you guys are acting like Earl Thomas is Earl Thomas from 2015, 2014, 2016 from with Legion of Boom. He is not that same guy. If your own team is calling you out, it's because they're seeing that there's something wrong in your game. And I think, honestly, Earl Thomas is still a really good safety. He's probably still top 10, but I don't think he's enough of a player to really, really hurt the Ravens. Sure, it's an inconvenience to lose a starting safety, but I don't think it's a huge hit to the Ravens team as a whole. They are still extremely talented on the offensive line, have a top 3 left tackle, have a great running game. Mark Ingram is extremely slept on. He's a red zone machine. So they also drafted this kid named J.K. Dobbins, who I think is a little slept on. I don't think he's going to be like super, super special, but I think he's going to be a nice addition to that backfield, better than the other guys they had last year. And for the Ravens, I really just have 2 really important games, just like the Steelers. I have one week 3 against the Chiefs. Week 3 against the Chiefs is huge. This is going to show you who is coming to play this year. Like who is the real top dog in the AFC. It's a great matchup. And I have the Ravens winning just because I trust the Ravens defense more than I trust the Chiefs defense, and I trust the Ravens offensive line more than I trust the Chiefs defensive line. And what you're going to see from this during this video is that I really focus most of my picks on how good your offensive line can perform and how good your defensive line can perform, because those are what actually win championships, ladies and gentlemen. You look at the Chiefs and you look at the Niners in the Super Bowl last year. They both had stellar defensive lines and stellar offensive lines and a great running game. And that's the Ravens. You look at the Ravens, great running game, great offensive line, great defensive line, a great secondary despite losing Earl Thomas, decent linebackers, and a great running game. And the passing game, when you have a great defense, a great running game, you don't necessarily need a great passing game as long as your passing game is good enough. You know what I mean? And I think that they're one of the few teams that can actually go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs, and at home early in the year, week 3, the Ravens are going to come and get a W. Now, the second important game I have, and to be honest with you, looking at the Ravens schedule, it's an extremely easy schedule, is week 13 against the Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys, aside from the Chiefs, are probably the probably the second or third most talented team they play. The Browns are pretty talented, but I think they're a little bit more talented than the Browns, and they're just a little bit more talented than the Eagles, and slightly more talented than the Steelers as well. I think the Cowboys are another talented team that is gonna try and take down the Ravens, because you'll notice at this point I barely gave them their last loss against the Steelers in Week 12. And this is an important game. Bouncing back from the loss, how can they handle another high-powered offense that performs just a tad bit differently? Because as you can tell, the Chiefs are a high fly, pass the ball, throw for 320 yards each game, 4 touchdowns from Mahomes. You're not going to see a lot of running the football. But with the Cowboys, you're going to see more of that. Let's pound the ball with Zeke. Let's throw some play action passes and see what we can do. And that's what I want to see if the Ravens can actually stop, because there aren't many teams that do that aside that they play on their schedule. And I think it's going to be a very important game for them to win, although I don't think it's particularly as important as other teams' important games that I have listed in this video. Moving on to the AFC South, a very, very, very sad division. We have coming in at last, guys, the Jaguars. Let's be honest here, guys. The Jags, they're not trying to win. They are not trying to win. The Jags, I'm giving them 1 win, but I could see them going 0-16. Like, these guys are not here to win football games this season. And honestly, the person I feel for the most on that team is Gardner Minshew, who has had a particularly weird career, even though he's only been in the league for, a year. And the thing is with Minshew is that if you look at the film, he's not a bad quarterback. Is he a top 10 quarterback? Obviously not. Is he even top 12, top 13? Probably not. He's probably a top half quarterback, a viable starter in this league. But the way that the Jaguars are trading Minshew is just sad. They're obviously tanking. I mean, you trade away you start off last year trading Jalen Ramsey. You trade away Unique Ngakoue. You trade away you don't trade away. You just release Leonard Fournette because he doesn't fit your scheme. He doesn't fit a 50 catch running back, 1,000-yard rusher does not fit your scheme. Well, I guess whoever your backup is, which I don't even know fits your scheme. It's just lame excuses. The Jaguars need to come out and say, hey, we're tanking. I'd be okay with that. If you guys are tanking, okay. You guys want Trevor Lawrence. It's very obvious. That's a game-changing quarterback. But don't come out and pretend like you're trying to win football games. I don't have much to say here. This is the worst roster in the NFL. And literally, most NFL fans can't name 5 players on this team aside from Gardner Minshew and DJ Chark. Literally, trying to name me like 5 Jaguars players, like for real. So I can, just because I watch a lot of football, but literally I know Josh Allen, Miles Jack, Gardner Minshew, DJ Chark. Like who else do you know on the Jags? Like, let's be real here. It's just such a sad sight to see. I mean, you got to really feel for Minshew, and let's just hope that out of all this, some good comes and they let Minshew go and, they release him next year and he's able to choose a team to go to. This reminds me a lot of another team that I'll get to later in the next video. So coming in at number 3 in the AFC South, we have the Houston Texans. Now, I already know I'm going to take a lot of heat for this pick. The Texans obviously are an extremely talented team on offense, but if we're really looking deep into the Texans, you're going to notice 3 major problems. The number one problem for the Texans is Bill O'Brien. What is this guy doing? I was one of those people that really, 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 really thought that Bill O'Brien was actually a good coach. And over the past 2 seasons, I've really convinced myself otherwise. He is not a good coach. He's just not doing it for the Texans. And honestly, I feel for Deshaun. If I'm Deshaun, I'm getting out of there, because it's very obvious who's in control here in Houston. It's Bill O'Brien. He's the GM. He's the head coach. And he's honestly doing a very bad job of not only coaching this team, but getting this team decent players. I mean, the best move that he made was getting Tunsil and signing him, But other than that, like, I really don't see much here. Like, this team is Deshaun Watson and their skill positions on offense, They're Deshaun Watson and his receivers, okay? That is the offense. I mean, they have David Johnson, who honestly, I'm not going to give fantasy advice in this video, but like, if you have David Johnson, just release him. He's not going to be your number 1 back, just saying. Anyways, Deshaun Watson still has an atrocious offensive line. I don't care what anybody says. His offensive line is not good. He has a left tackle and that's it. Wow, his left side is protected. This is an atrocious offensive line. I mean, PFF last season had the Texans' offensive line at the bottom of the league. I mean, the bottom half of the league. And it doesn't look like it's going to change. They had him at 20th. And this season, they're still projected to not get anywhere into the top half of offensive lines. And another thing is, like, let's be honest here. For a second, let's just look at this Texans defensive line. Aside from J.J. Watt and Whitney Mercilus, who honestly is aging, and so is J.J. Watt, who on this defensive line is actually getting any kind of production? Okay, they were 26th in sacks last year. 26th in sacks, 26. And I cannot express how important it is for a team to get pressure with their defensive line. Okay? If you cannot get pressure on the opposing team's quarterback, then you're going to lose football games, just like if you can't get turnovers. This team is just a patchwork. This is going to be Deshaun Watson late in football games trying to mount comebacks. That is what this team's going to be. I have them going 8-8. Honestly, I could see this team going maybe even 7-9, 6-10 at the worst, and at the very best, I see them going 9-7 and barely squeezing into the playoffs. But spoiler alert: this team doesn't make the playoffs in a very tough AFC. Now, I do want to look at two interesting games that are just going to show me whether or not this team can actually compete. And they're two early games. The number one game is going to be against the Chiefs. Week 1. Can this team put up points and create some kind of stop on defense? I don't think they're going to win this game, but can they show me that they're not as bad as I think they are? And the second most important game comes against Minnesota. And can this offense actually play against a legit defense? And I could see the same for the Steelers. Can this offense play against a legit defense? And if they can do that, then maybe I'll say, then maybe, just maybe they have a chance at the playoffs. But other than that, I don't think this team is making the playoffs. And if I'm Deshaun Watson, honestly, I'm looking at perhaps not re-signing with the Texans. I don't know if you guys have seen this. There's been rumors that they've been working towards a deal, and it's just not working out. If I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm saying, hey, look, the Bears need a quarterback. Maybe look at the Bears, move to the NFC. There's going to be suitors for Deshaun Watson. So if I'm Deshaun Watson, if it doesn't work out this year, let's start planning ahead for my future. And what is going to be my legacy? Am I just going to be a quarterback that plays for subpar teams and makes them look good? Or am I going to play for a real contender and win Super Bowls? Because that's where I think his talent is at. Now, coming in at number 2 in the AFC South, ladies and gentlemen, we have last year's almost AFC champions. Actually, not almost. But anyways, we have the Tennessee Titans coming in at number 2 at a solid record of 9-7, which is honestly what I think this team's sweet spot is. And 9-7 to me just feels right. This team is not particularly extremely good at one thing. Maybe running their football is their main identity, but this team is a team that can beat you in different ways. They can run up the score. The Titans are sneaky good on offense. They have, honestly, one of the best receiving cores in the league. And not just at the receiver position. Their backs can catch out of the backfield. Even Derrick Henry, for a guy that's that big and that massive, can actually catch the football. And Jonnu Smith is a very slept-on tight end. He's not a really, really good tight end, but he's a very solid tight end, especially receiving wise. He's got decent speed. He's got the size to size up against safeties, and he's got the power to break through linebackers and get those contested catches. And like I said, the speed really helps him out there. But what I think really shines for the Titans is that they play disciplined football and they play really tough defense. I mean, Mike Vrabel was a great hire for the Titans. I mean, honestly, Mike Vrabel is, honestly, in my opinion, one of the best young coach. Oh, he's pretty young. One of the best coaches in football right now. And what he's done with this team, which honestly is talented, but is in that middle tier of talent. They're not quite a top 5 team in talent, but they're also and they're top 10. They're top 10 in terms of talent, coaching, A plus, quarterback, B minus, receivers, A minus, running backs, A minus, defensive line, honestly, I give it like a B minus at best. Linebackers, honestly, I like their linebackers. I give them a B. Secondary, I give them a B plus. They're a very solid team, but like I said, they're just not as talented as a Ravens team or even a Browns team or a Niners team. But they're good enough to where when they play sound football, they are going to beat you. They're a very disciplined team. Like I said, not a team that's going to make too many dumb mistakes, especially, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when Ryan Tannehill came in at quarterback and, led them on that run to make the playoffs and got them all the way to the AFC Championship team, something was just a little bit different about the Titans. They seem to play almost tougher. It's almost like Ryan Tannehill was just that piece that they needed to turn things around, which I don't know if you guys watched Ryan Tannehill when he was with the Dolphins in Miami, but he was a pretty good quarterback. Like I said, I don't think Ryan Tannehill is a top 10 quarterback. I'd say he's right around 13. 13 at its best. 14 is what I'd feel comfortable putting him at. He can throw the ball. He's mobile. I don't know if you guys knew this, but he played receiver at one point in his career. Not in the NFL, obviously, but he can. The guy can move. He can throw the football pretty good. He's just a solid quarterback. Reminds me a little bit of Kirk Cousins in terms of what they can do. Kirk probably throws the ball a little bit better, but this team is going to beat you by not creating turnovers, playing good defense, and just, like I said, not trying to do too much because they know what they have to do to beat you. Like every week, it seems like they change what they have to do according to the team which they play, which is honestly what a lot of teams need to start doing instead of just trying to say, hey, we want to pass the football. We're going to throw the football against everybody, even if they have a really good defensive line. So I have the Titans finishing 9-7. I have just two interesting games to look at. I'm not going to go too in depth into them. Just two games. I'm just going to say a quick few words about them. Week 3 against the Vikings. The Vikings are a team which I'm not going to go super in depth about, but just a team that's extremely talented on both sides of the ball. And like the Titans, I'm not too sure about their quarterback. They have a talented quarterback in Kirk Cousins, but these are two similar teams in my opinion. I think the Vikings are a little bit more talented than the Vikings are more talented than the Titans, but this kind of reminds me of the AFC version of the Vikings. So I have them winning this game simply because I think that they get off to a hot start, and then, as you can tell, they cool down a little bit, play like some hard teams. But the second game I want to look at is against Baltimore. Now, the reason I picked Baltimore as another game to look at is because we all know Baltimore is going to win that game. They're going to be pissed that they lost and were eliminated in the playoffs. And if you guys remember, in the playoffs, it was not pretty for Baltimore. They took an early exit. Lamar once again was criticized by the media for choking in the playoffs. But like I said, I think the Ravens win this game. But the reason it's important for Tennessee is to show me whether or not there's still that same team going into the playoffs, because I have this as a playoff team. Spoiler alert. Going into the playoffs, can they show me, like, this is a midseason game going into the playoffs? Can they show me that they are actually going to be contenders and not just make the playoffs and get eliminated in, the wild card game? So like I said, important game to look at. And I think you guys can tell by now who I have at number one team left, and that is the Indianapolis Colts. Now the Colts are another sleeper team. Actually, my second sleeper team in the AFC, aside from the Steelers. The Colts last year did not have the season that a lot of Colts fans thought they would. A lot of people thought Jacoby Brissett was going to pop. The Colts were going to be a good team again. They had the right pieces around them. They had the offensive line. They had the running game. They had a decent defense. But I think the two things that are really going to make the Colts this year is, number one, Phillip Rivers, who honestly people are sleeping on. You saw him throw a bunch of picks last year. You saw him not show up in the clutch moments with the Chargers. But you got to look at what he had around him. Sure, he had plenty of talent when it comes to skill positions, which he'll still have here in Indy. But his offensive line is nowhere near as good as the Colts. The Colts have a top 3 O-line. According to PFF, it's number 3, but we all know it's probably the best offensive line in football, all-around offensive line. I'm talking about both running game and passing game. But we're just say, for the argument's sake, let's just say it's number 3. Phillip Rivers is going to have a lot more time to throw the ball, and if you know anything about Phillip Rivers, you know that he is a very accurate quarterback, despite what you may see in the stats sheet. He is an accurate quarterback, and he's a gunslinger, but I don't think he throws nearly as many picks as last year, but he's also not going to throw he's not going to have to throw as much as he did last year, because he's going to have a great running game to support him, and that's because the second part of this team that I'm super excited for is Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor, I've been on this guy forever, but I think he's going to have the type of impact Saquon Barkley had when he came into the league in terms of what he was able to do for his team offensively. Now, I'm not saying that they're the same player, although they do have some similarities. I think that it's just the impact that he's going to have on the team, on the Colts, is just going to be game-changing for them, because he can catch the ball to the backfield. He can run very well, runs very hard, and has pretty good speed. And I think that's kind of what the Colts needed. I mean, sure, they had Marlon Mack last year, but Jonathan Taylor is going to be this team's number 1 back, and is going to be the workhorse for this team. And T.Y. Hilton is going to match up perfectly with Phillip. So watch out for the Colts. And the 2 games I have for the Colts is, the first game is an early game, and it's actually week 5 against the Browns. Now, I have them losing this game just because the Browns are at home, and I think they cool off. The Colts cool off after going on a 4-game winning streak. But the reason I think this game is so important is because we're going to see how they match up against a really talented offensive team. And the Colts have a solid defense. They really do. This was a surprising stat to me. I did not know they were 12th in total takeaways, and 16th in sacks. I thought they'd be more bottom 10 in sacks, bottom 10 in takeaways, but they were decent. Those are decent numbers, and they're honestly only going to get better this year as the team gains more experience and doesn't have a quarterback constantly giving up the ball like Jacoby Brissett did last year, and a more potent offense that doesn't allow their defense to stay on the field for as long. So you can expect that defense to improve a lot. And the reason I have the Browns game as an important game is because, like I said, it's going to show me how the Colts match up against a high-powered offense, because it's going to be the first high-powered offense they play, aside from maybe the Vikings early in the year. But this is when, the Colts are going to be comfortable. They're going to start fitting into what their identity is, what they do on both sides of the football. And this is going to show me just how good they are. In the second game, I have also in week 9 against the Ravens, which also I have a loss. But the reason I think this game is so important for them, it's going to show me, are they real contenders, or are they just going to fall apart once they hit the playoffs? Because as we know, Baltimore is going to be a playoff team, and are we going to be able to see if the Colts are contenders or pretenders? It's such a cliche thing to say, but the Colts, like I said, can they keep up with not only a high-powered offense, but a defense that can put a stop to you? I mean, this is going to be a great matchup in a game that you do not want to miss at all. So, coming to an end with the AFC South, let's move on to the AFC East. Now, like I said, I've said this multiple times, but honestly, all these divisions are extremely interesting. But this, honestly, to me, was the most unpredictable division. I mean, I did not know what I was going to do once I got here. I started looking through each team's schedule, and I was like, man, who? But there was one team that wasn't very hard for me at all to predict, and that was the New York Jets coming in last place. Now, the Jets are an interesting team, but not in a good way. Just interesting on how bad I think they're going to be this year. I mean, you have a coach that does not get along with any of his players for some reason. Now, I liked Adam Gase when he was in Miami, but ever since he got to the Jets, he's been acting a little funky. I don't know what's up with him. He just can't get along with the star players. Got rid of Jamal Adams. Looks like he hates Le'Veon Bell for some reason. And I'm not going to say too much about the Jets. Besides, I feel bad for Sam Darnold, just like I feel bad for Minshew. Sam Darnold is going to take a lot of heat this year because they're not going to win football games. And frankly, Sam Darnold has like literally nothing around him. His offensive line is absolutely atrocious. Like, I mean, not a good offensive line at all. They were PFF has them rated 28th, a bottom 4 offensive line in the NFL. Not good at all. I gave them 2 wins, and they're both in division games. The first one comes against the Patriots at home. I think that, when it comes to in division games, like division rivals, both teams are always going to play really hard, and somebody's going to get upset even though they're a good team. So I just gave them a win against the Patriots and a win against the Dolphins at home. And that's going to be their 2 wins for the season. Honestly, they face a pretty brutal schedule, playing the AFC West, and then also playing teams like the Browns and also the AFC West, and the Chiefs and the Broncos and the Raiders, all really good offenses. But I don't see too much come out of the Jets. Honestly, if I'm Le'Veon Bell, I'm pretty unhappy, and I request a trade maybe some midway through the season, because I don't want to waste the prime of my career playing for a mediocre team. And honestly, as much as I liked Adam Gase in Miami, I do not like him here with the Jets. I think that I just don't like the team at all. There's not much to look forward to if you're a Jets fan besides a top pick in the draft this year. And I don't got much else to say. Coming in at number 3 in the AFC East, we have the Miami Dolphins, which are 4-12, but are a good 4-12, if that makes sense, because I think they're going to be extremely competitive this year. One thing that I will tell you guys is Tua's not going to play this year. And if he does play, it's going to be like the last 4 games of the season at best case scenario, just because of the weird off season, no preseason. It'd be dumb to play Tua within the first 10 games. I would not play Tua. Let him sit, let him relax, let him learn the offense, let him see how the NFL works. Just let him soak in all this information, so when you actually do start him next season, he's prepared. And the Dolphins, like I said, are a good 4-12. They're going to be competitive, although they don't have quite the pieces on the offensive line or the defensive line. I think their skill positions aren't that bad. I like getting Matt Breida. I think Xavier Howard is a very good underrated corner. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick will lead him to a few wins. I don't know if you guys know this, but as I'm recording this video, just a few days ago, Ryan Fitzpatrick lost his mother, so he has not been attending practice, which is 100% understandable. Although I do think he will be back week 1, which is why I don't think Tua will start. And also at this time, actually, Josh Rosen was just released from the Dolphins, which is honestly great for him. So he can go play for a good organization, gets to choose his own place to go to. But they play a pretty tough schedule as well. Like I said, they play the AFC West and they play the NFC West, both really good divisions. And I give them the 4 wins I gave them against were, the Jags, not a good team. The Jets, also not a good team. The Bengals, which honestly, like I talked about earlier, have a lot of potential in the upcoming years, and they're also rebuilding just like Miami, which will have hopefully a bright future. And the Patriots, because the Dolphins every year just seem to beat the Patriots at home for some reason. And there's not much else to say about the Dolphins. They're gonna be like I said, a good 4-12. And if you're a Dolphins fan, don't be sad. Just know that you're gonna pick up a good player in the draft, and that it will be a fun 4-12. And honestly, I could see this team finishing maybe even 6-10. Maybe they can snatch a win against the Bills in the division, or maybe even a win against the Cardinals, possibly. But like I said, 4-12 sounds right about good for me. And like I said, they're a good 4-12, not a bad 4-12. Now, coming in 3rd place is the New England Patriots. Now, this was hands down the hardest team for me to predict, by far. I at one point had them going 5-11. Then I had them 6-10. Then I had them 9-7. Then I had them 8-8. And then I finally realized, you know what? This team is going to have a winning record. But like I said, I could also see them going 8-8. My 3 main issues with the Patriots: 6 of their starters on offense are not coming back this year. They have, not just on offense, also on defense, they had the most players opt out of the season, and they have the least amount of returning starters coming back out of all the teams in the NFL, which means all a bunch of new guys, right? And honestly, Cam, a lot of people are hating on Cam, saying that Cam's not gonna have a good year. I think he'll have a good year. He's gonna, maybe statistically won't be impressive, but what's really gonna make it for Cam this year is, can he show that he's a real leader that's focused on winning and that is gonna embrace the culture that he goes to, whether or not his future is with the Patriots for another year. Maybe he re-signs with the Patriots at the end of the season. Maybe he doesn't, but regardless, you can't count out Bill Belichick, literally one of the greatest coaches of all time, if not the greatest coach of all time. And you can, like I said, you can't fully count out these guys. So I have them going 7-9. And although it's not a winning record, it's still not a bad record by any means, especially in a tougher AFC. Like I'm saying, they also play the NFC West, which is brutal. Like I said, AFC West, they face the Chiefs in week 4 at Kansas City. They face, the Niners at home in week 7. They face the Cardinals at home, which I gave them a win against, but I don't think this team makes the playoffs. But if they were, I wouldn't be surprised. Just three things to look forward to if you're a Patriots fan. Cam's going to be fun to watch. Have fun. Enjoy Cam while you have him, because he might not be there next year. He might go to a different team. And you're just going to have if you're a Patriots fan, you're going to have a lot of fun watching Cam Newton play. Number 2 thing I'm going to look forward to is N'Keal Harry and their receivers. Julian Edelman, probably one of his last years here in the NFL. Those 2 guys, N'Keal Harry, show that he was truly worth his value at what he was picked at in the first round, like a season ago. And will Julian Edelman have flashes of that dominant slot receiver, tough guy that's not afraid to make catches in the middle of the field? And I think, frankly, he's going to become Cam Newton's best friend on offense, because he's going to be the only reliable target. And number 3, look at the tight ends that you guys drafted. You guys got 2 rookie tight ends. One of them, I forget his first name, but Aisi. He seems like a good tight end. He's got speed. He's got decent size. And I'm not saying he's the next Gronk or anything, but he could be a nice little addition for the Patriots moving forward. Honestly, I do think that next season, I know we're talking about this season, but next season, the Patriots could be back with some vengeance and potentially be right back on top of the AFC. So if you're a Patriots fan, enjoy the time off, maybe do something else in February besides watching the Super Bowl. Anyways, coming in at number 1 in the AFC East, we have the Bills. Now, I said that this division was a little bit hard for me to figure out. The Bills were hard for me to figure out. I know they were going to be good, but just how good? And I have them finishing at 11-5. Now, as you can tell, it's not much of an improvement from last year, but I think they're better 11-5, if that makes sense. I have them losing only 5 games, and those 5 games are to the Rams, which are an underrated team, the Cardinals, which is another underrated team, the Niners, which is a really good team, and the Patriots, which I just think they're going to slip one against the Patriots. But other than that, I have them winning against Kansas City. What? Yeah, that's right. I think their defense matches up very well against Kansas City's offense because of just how athletic they are on defense, okay? I really like their secondary. They're able to get pressure on the quarterback, and they're able to create turnovers. Now, what's really going to make or break this team is Josh Allen and their offensive line. Josh Allen last year threw for 3,089 yards, 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And that is not very good, considering that, he rushed for 9 touchdowns, not threw 9 interceptions. And honestly, I think he can do better. If this team is going to be a real contender, his stats got to look more around 3,800 yards, 30 touchdowns, and got to control those interceptions. He finished with a 47.3 QBR, guys. That is not good. That is not good at all. He finished 23rd in passing yards and, like I said, 21st in touchdowns. He did get Stephon Diggs, which honestly I think to him was, for this team and for Josh Allen, is really good, because Stephon Diggs is a reliable receiver who can create separation and just win those contested catches and win one-on-one against most corners. And they still have Brown from last year, which honestly, he surprised me last year. I did not think he was going to do that good. And they still have Cole Beasley. Now, going back to their old offensive line, they finished 21st according to PFF, and they're going to be 21st again according to PFF. And here's the thing. This offensive line has to perform a little bit better, because you can't have a mediocre quarterback in Josh Allen, who has a big arm and has a lot of talent and can improve. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I'm just saying right now in stages in his career, he's kind of mediocre. And you can't have that and a mediocre offensive line, because it's just a recipe for disaster. If the Bills did not have the defense that they have, then honestly, I don't think they'd be that good. So like I said, this is going to come down to Josh Allen making plays and his offensive line giving him the protection he needs to make those big plays. And I think Josh Allen has to learn to not always go for that big play. He wants to throw the ball. He wants to go deep. He wants to make that big play. And it kind of seems like he's trying to play the hero at the end of games, and it's just not working out for him. He's got to learn to relax, take what's available, and move the chains. And if he's able to do that, then he's going to be able to improve his stats and maybe lead his team to a deep playoff run, and perhaps maybe even make it to the AFC Championship. Now, 2 games to look at. Week 6 against the Chiefs. I have them winning that game. Okay? And the reason is, like I said, it's their defense. But if their offense does not show up to play that game at home, then they're going to get blown out. Okay? If their offense needs to show up and help out their defense, or else that game is not going to be won. Now, the second game to look at is against Seattle, Week 9. Seattle is another interesting team. Their defense is better than Seattle's offense, all right? And their defense has to just show me that they can consistently get those stops and not let Russell Wilson do his thing, because Russell Wilson is just like Lamar Jackson. And just like Patrick Mahomes, he's going to extend plays, run around, and just give his receivers extra time and his offensive line extra time, and just create plays that will amaze you. And that's the type of football that the Bills are going to face. They're going to face Lamar Jackson. They're going to face Patrick Mahomes if they make a deep playoff run. And they need to be able to stop those kinds of quarterbacks. I gave them a win because it's at home. But like I said, they need to show me they can stop that kind of quarterback. Now, moving on to the AFC West. Coming in at last place, ladies and gentlemen, we have the San Diego Chargers, which honestly to me was, if you would have told me this a few months ago, I would have been like, no way, the Chargers are coming in second, second or third. But as you know, the Chargers lost Derwin James again due to injury, and it's just horrible, man. Stuff you don't want to see. The Chargers have another guy go down to injury, and Derwin James is that X factor kind of player that is just a game changer, man. Joey Bosa is that other guy on defense, but Derwin James is the guy on defense besides Joey Bosa. Like, the guy. I think he's honestly a more talented player than Joey Bosa. Even though Joey Bosa is a top 5 edge rusher, I think Derwin James is the best safety in the game. Now, I still think they're going to be a competitive team. I have them finishing 6-10. Pre-Derwin James injury, I had them going 9-7. And yes, I do think Derwin James is worth 3 wins. And here's the thing. Tyrod Taylor is a talented quarterback, but Justin Herbert should not see the field this year at all. First of all, I wasn't particularly high on Justin Herbert coming out of the draft, just like I wasn't high on Jordan Love. Both project quarterbacks, not real prospects. If you're going to draft a quarterback like that, you need to let him sit for a season, maybe even 2, and just not shake his confidence. So from the Chargers, I'm playing Tyrod the entire season and just seeing what he can do. Tyrod by no means is a scrub. He took the Bills to the playoffs a couple years back, and he has the capability to move around in the pocket, extend plays, and make good throws. But I just think this Chargers team is at a loss with Derwin James. Another problem I had with him was the offensive line, which I thought was going to be mitigated by, Tyrod Taylor being a mobile quarterback and be able to extend plays, unlike Phillip Rivers, who's an older quarterback and can't extend plays and move around as well as he can. But they had last year with Phillip Rivers, and this is mainly due to their O-line, who finished 30th in the league. Ladies and gentlemen, 30th in the league. Where they had negative 17 turnover differential. Not good at all. And you don't win football games like that. I think that number will be hopefully down this year and probably more around, hopefully positive. But they're a good defense. And they're a talented team. They're a talented team by no means. They're talented. Their defensive line is talented. Their secondary is talented. They have probably the best depth at corner in the entire NFL. I mean, Casey Hayward's an absolute beast, and the other guys around Casey Hayward are beasts as well. But the loss of Derwin James really hurts, and their linebackers have always, in my opinion, been a little bit mediocre. And that team's really defined on defense by their defensive line and their secondary. And on offense, the team's always been defined by Phillip Rivers and his skill guys. And the running game has always come second, and then the offensive line has always been pretty mediocre. So I think 6-10 fits them pretty well. Maybe at the very best, I see them scratching out one more win and making it 7-9. But coming in at number 3 in the division, we have the Raiders, who at one point I had them going 10-6, but just kind of said, let me sleep on it. Let me look at the schedule again. Let me think about this very well before I put that out there. And my main issue with the Raiders is just how atrocious their defense is. I mean, just looking at the stats from last year, 25th in sacks, 31st in takeaways, and 19th in yards allowed per game at a whopping 354 yards allowed per game. Their offensive line is not as bad as their defense. It's actually middle of the road, not terrible. But like I said, the defense is my main issue here. They're just not a team that can create turnovers. They can't create pressure. And what happens, it allows teams to sustain drives and continue to carry momentum. If you're down 7, right, a turnover helps a ton. Getting that turnover changes momentum, allows your team to regain control over the situation. And how do you create turnovers? You create turnovers by forcing the quarterback to throw picks, by creating pressure. Because I don't care how good your quarterback is, if you're constantly harassing and pressuring a quarterback, sooner or later he's going to throw a pick or fumble the ball himself. Now, moving on to their offense is actually where I think the strength of this team comes from. Like I said, last year they were ranked 15th by PFF. This year they're ranked 11th, potentially a top 10 offensive line. And besides their offensive line, which is a pretty good offensive line, Derek Carr is somebody I want to talk about. Derek Carr is extremely, 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 extremely underrated and often criticized, in my opinion, way too much. He's a very talented quarterback. And is, like I said, he's probably 11th or 12th in my book in terms of how good he is at the quarterback position. And people sleep on him. I mean, this guy's passer rating has been amazing every year. Year in and year out, this man throws for pretty close to 30 touchdowns every year, and is able to significantly just show that he doesn't throw picks and doesn't make mistakes. The knock on him is he doesn't throw the ball downfield. But I mean, if you look at their scheme is a West Coast scheme. It's more of a, let's throw the ball at the very most 15 yards downfield, let the receiver make a play. And if we have to go deep, then we'll go deep. But like I said, enough with the Derek Carr. Hey, okay, I don't have all the stats in front of me, which is why I'm not listing them to you. But just go up and look up Derek Carr and where he ranks all time in his passer rating. I guarantee you it's going to shock you where he's at and who he's in front of. they had, at the time when I was doing research into the Raiders, they had Tyrell Williams. Obviously, he's out for the season. They still have Hunter Renfrow, Henry Ruggs, and Josh Jacobs at running back. Josh Jacobs is extremely talented, and I think he's going to have another 1,000-yard rushing season. The receiver is Tyrell Williams. I mean, it's a loss, but it's not a huge loss. I mean, Henry Ruggs is going to step in and make an immediate impact in this team and is going to allow Derek Carr to throw the ball downfield and give him a good receiver to look at. Now, like I said, I have them finishing 9-7. At one point, I did have them finishing 9-6, but what really stopped me from making that potentially disastrous, having a disaster of a pick, was the fact that their defense is atrocious. Now, one person that I will point out on the defense to look forward to is Jonathan Abraham. He did not play last year because of an injury, but this year he's going to pop. Trust me on that. I'm just going to go over one interesting game to look at. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but this is going to be a fun game to look at. Week 11 at home against the Chiefs. I have them losing that game, but this potentially could be a fireworks show. I mean, this could be a game that goes into the 40s, maybe even 50s by both teams. This could be a shootout. So that's an interesting game to look at. So moving on, and next in the division, we have the Denver Broncos coming in second place. Now, the Broncos are a team that I wasn't as high on last year. And then as the season progressed, I said, you know what, this could be a good team next year. And I had them making the playoff. If you would ask me a few months ago, are the Broncos making the playoffs? I would have said yes. Now looking back at it, I think they barely missed the playoffs, but nonetheless, a very talented team. The main thing that concerns me is Drew Lock. Is he legit? Is he going to be a legit quarterback? Is he going to be able to finally prove that John Elway is not terrible at drafting quarterbacks? He's a somewhat mobile quarterback with a good arm, not a great arm, a good arm, and doesn't make horrible choices when throwing the ball, which is honestly what I like about him. And he's going to be really what proves whether or not the Broncos can make a playoff push. And, I mean, they have all the right pieces. They have a decent offensive line, not great, a decent offensive line. They have good weapons. They have a solid running game. They have Phillip Lindsay, and then they just got Melvin Gordon from the Chargers. And they have Cortland Sutton at wide receiver. They drafted Jerry Jeudy. And they have Noah Fant, who I think is going to pop this year. Hopefully. And like I said, they have a solid secondary. They have a solid D-line. They're a solid team. Like, they have very few holes, aside from the offensive line, which is an average offensive line, above average offensive line. Last year, they were ranked 12th. PFF will have them 14th this year, according to their predictions. But not a bad team. And like I said, this is going to mainly come down to Drew Lock. And the two games you're going to look forward to, if you're a Broncos fan, is look at week 3 against the Bucs. Can they slow down the absolute fireworks show that is the Buccaneers offense? Now, I have them winning that game because it's at home, and Tom Brady, just in case you don't know, he always struggles when playing at Denver. He's always struggled playing at Denver for some reason. So I have them losing that game. I have the Broncos winning that game and the Bucs losing that game. But that's going to be an interesting game, and it's going to show you if the Broncos can stop a legit offense. Now, the second game is away against the Chiefs. Now, I have them losing early in the season, and I also have them losing this game in week 13. But the reason that I think that this game is going to be interesting is every time you play a division rival for the second time, you always play them like 100 times better. Because you know what they're gonna do. You have film on them. You know what went wrong last time, and you're trying to prove that you can beat them. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. That you're gonna be able to come back from that loss that you had. And I think that they could potentially snatch this game from the Chiefs. Although I do give the Chiefs home field advantage and have them win that game. But if you're a Broncos fan, look forward to that game. So I think 8-8 sounds just about right for me for the Broncos. If you disagree, well, then go down in the comment section and tell me how bad I am at this. Anyways, coming at number 1, to nobody's surprise, is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs, there's not much to say about the Chiefs. I have them finishing 12-4, and you might be like, what, 12-4? The Chiefs? No way, they could go undefeated. Well, tell you what, they're not going to go undefeated because they play the Ravens and they play the Bucks. And they play the Saints and they play the Bills. Those teams are the teams that are going to beat them. Now, if you're a Chiefs fan, don't be discouraged by this 12-4 record. You guys are still probably going to be in the AFC Championship and maybe even the Super Bowl. But just those 4 games, if you're a fan, just look forward to them. I'm only going to go in depth on 2 of them, which is the Saints. Excuse me, not the Saints, which is the Bucks and the Ravens, which are, in my opinion, are going to be the 2 best offenses they face. Now, the Ravens, like I said in the previous game, I think they match up pretty well against the Chiefs, and I think they snatch this win because they're at home. But if you're a Chiefs fan, look, this is what you want to see in that game. You want to be able to see that the defense can stop a mobile quarterback like Lamar Jackson, because chances are you're going to see him again in the playoffs, and you want to see how well your defensive line is able to contain Lamar and force him to make throws. And the way that you're going to do that is, number 1, stopping the run game, so actually forcing Lamar to throw the ball. And number 2, keeping him in the pocket. Don't let him come out and extend plays. Put a spy on him. Do not let Lamar out of the pocket, because as soon as you do, it's game over. And the second game is against the Bucks, which I think are probably going to finish with the top 3 offense in the NFL and could rival the Chiefs offense. Now, this is another fireworks show, and I think this is another game that could be in the 40s, maybe even 50s, like I said with the Raiders in the week before. And if you're the Chiefs, this is going to be a test for you, and see if you can survive a shootout against another potent offense. And other than that, that's really all I have to say about the Chiefs. There's not much else to say. The Chiefs are a beast. Their defense is solid. Their offensive line is solid. Their skill position at wide receiver is outstanding. Clyde Edwards Jr. is, although I think he's overrated, still going to be a great addition to the team. And Patrick Mahomes is, as you know, Patrick Mahomes. So with all that being said, this video is starting to turn out very long. So let's go look at the standings. And coming in at number 1 in the AFC, we have the Baltimore Ravens at 15-1. The Ravens are my number 1 seed. And as you can tell, I only have them with 1 loss, and they're going to finish number 1. They have a relatively easy schedule compared to everybody else, and that's why I think their record justifies that. The Chiefs at 12-4 still come in second, so that's why I said don't be discouraged by the 12-4 record. Coming in at 3rd place, we have the Bills, who win the AFC East. Coming in 4th, we have Indy. Coming in 5th for the first wildcard spot, we have the Steelers. Coming in 6th, we have the Titans, snatching up the second wildcard spot. And coming in 7th, for the first time ever, a 7th seed team will be the Cleveland Browns, making the playoffs. Now, the team that I think could possibly steal the Browns playoff spot is either the Broncos or the Texans. Those are the only 2 teams that I think could even challenge. The Patriots are a long shot, and the Raiders are also another long shot. So at the number 7 spot, you can either expect the Browns, the Texans, or the Broncos. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our deep dive into this AFC predictions. Now, I know this video was a little bit elongated. I was thinking this was going to be maybe tops 35 minutes. It is right now recording time over an hour. So I will have a video up very soon for the NFC, which I'm extremely excited about. And that's where the picks actually get wild. The AFC was a little bit more predictable for me, just a few teams, but the NFC is extremely wild, and you guys are probably going to be surprised by my picks. So if you agree with my picks, let me know. If you don't, also let me know, and stay tuned for the next video. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and see you next time, guys.